I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, seeking advice from strangers on the internet about my family situation. You ever get that phone call that makes your stomach drop? That was mine last Tuesday. Mom's voice, shaky and desperate, crying about Bobby's failed business and how they had lost everything. 8 years of silence, and suddenly they want back into my life. Funny how that works. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We're just getting started, and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Thanks for being here. Now back to the story. My name is Johnny, I'm 32, and I've been estranged from my parents for almost 8 years now. But this story starts way back, in a small Ohio town where being the smart kid meant absolutely nothing if you couldn't throw a perfect spiral. Growing up, I was the older brother by 2 years, but you'd never know it from how our parents treated us. Bobby was the golden child from day one. Outgoing, athletic, charming. Everything I wasn't. I was the bookworm with thick glasses who preferred equations over touchdowns. Dad was a former high school football star who never quite got over his glory days. When Bobby showed interest in sports, Dad practically glowed. Hours in the backyard, teaching Bobby perfect spirals while I sat on the porch with my homework. Mom wasn't as obvious about her favoritism, but it was there. Bobby's finger paintings covered the fridge while my straight-A report cards got a simple "good job, Johnny." I remember one particularly brutal moment when I was 10. I'd won the school science fair with this elaborate project on renewable energy. I was bursting with excitement, racing home to show my parents. But when I got there, they were too busy celebrating Bobby making the junior football team. My blue ribbon sat forgotten on the kitchen counter like yesterday's newspaper. That became the pattern. Every achievement, every milestone, overshadowed by whatever Bobby was doing that week. Academic awards ceremony? Dad was at Bobby's football practice. Honor roll celebration? Mom was shopping for Bobby's new cleats. I started joking to myself that I could cure cancer, and they'd still be more excited about Bobby's batting average. High school was when things got really painful. I threw myself into academics, joined debate team, math club. Valedictorian material. Bobby coasted on charm and athletic ability, dating cheerleaders, partying every weekend. Classic small-town quarterback story. The teachers loved him, the kids worshipped him, and my parents acted like they'd won the lottery. I remember working on this massive debate tournament preparation, staying up until 2 a.m. researching constitutional law. Meanwhile, Bobby was out at parties, stumbling home drunk while I was highlighting Supreme Court cases. When I won the regional debate championship, Dad's response was, "That's nice, Johnny. Did you hear Bobby threw 3 touchdowns last night?" The night of my graduation, I stood at that podium as valedictorian. I'd worked weeks on my speech, practiced it in the mirror, recorded myself to get the timing perfect. As I scanned the audience for my family, Dad was there, sure. But he was filming Bobby, who was goofing off with friends in the back row, making faces at the camera. Even in my moment of triumph, I was still in his shadow. The speech I'd poured my heart into was background noise to Bobby's comedy show. After the ceremony, people congratulated me. Teachers shook my hand, told me how proud my parents must be. I looked around for them, found them by the football trophy case, talking to Bobby's coach about his prospects for the fall season. My diploma felt heavy in my hands, like it was made of lead instead of paper. College acceptance letters came in. Prestigious university, partial scholarship. I was over the moon, finally something that would make them proud. That joy lasted exactly one family meeting. They sat me down with those serious faces parents get when they're about to crush your dreams. "We can't help with tuition, Johnny. Unexpected expenses came up. We just don't have the money." My world collapsed. But I'm stubborn as hell, so I made it work. Student loans, part-time jobs, tutoring, library assistant, even spent a summer doing night shifts at a 24-hour diner. There were nights I was so exhausted I could barely stay awake during lectures. I'd drink so much coffee my hands shook during exams. But I pushed through, proud of doing it alone. The tutoring gig was particularly brutal. Rich kids whose parents paid me $20 an hour to explain calculus concepts their kids should have learned months ago. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen for the 4th night in a row because textbooks had cleaned out my bank account. I remember one kid complaining about his BMW being the wrong color while I was calculating bus fare home. Meanwhile, Bobby decided college wasn't for him. Worked at a local garage, spent evenings at bars. Our parents never seemed concerned. "That's our Bobby," they'd chuckle, always living in the moment. When I'd call home stressed about exams or worried about money, they'd cut the conversation short because Bobby was coming over for dinner. Family dinner. The one I was never invited to anymore because I was too busy with school. During winter break of my sophomore year, I came home for Christmas. Bobby had just gotten fired from his third job that year for showing up late repeatedly. Instead of being disappointed, Dad was helping him apply for unemployment benefits while making jokes about how Bobby needed a vacation anyway. I mentioned I'd made Dean's list again, and Mom said, "That's wonderful, honey," without looking up from wrapping Bobby's presents. Senior year, the truth bomb dropped. Bobby announced he was opening his own auto repair shop. My parents had given him their entire savings. The money they told me didn't exist. Every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about mounting debt. Every time I chose between textbooks and proper meals. Every time I'd called home crying about stress and got told to figure it out. They had money. They just chose Bobby instead. $30,000. That's what they gave him. I did the math obsessively for weeks afterward. $30,000 would have covered my remaining tuition and living expenses. Would have meant I didn't have to work 3 jobs during finals week. Would have meant I could have focused on studies instead of calculating tips at the diner at 3 a.m. When I confronted them about it, they tried justifying their decision. Bobby needs it more because he doesn't have a degree. You'll be fine because you're smart and will make good money as a doctor someday. The logic was stunning. Punish success, reward failure. Bobby gets handed a business on a silver platter because he couldn't be bothered with school, while I get debt and exhaustion because I had the audacity to work hard. They didn't understand the massive debt I'd taken on, the stress I'd been under, the nights I'd considered dropping out because the pressure was crushing me. They didn't care. Bobby needed help, so Bobby got help. Johnny was smart, so Johnny could figure it out alone. That was my breaking point. I finished my degree, got into medical school, and cut them off. Brief holiday phone calls, nothing more. I threw myself into medicine, determined to succeed despite their lack of support. Medical school was brutal, but at least it was brutal without the added weight of family disappointment. During my second year, I met Donna. Law student, brilliant, compassionate, had this way of seeing right through people's defenses. For the first time, I felt truly seen. She became my rock, listening to my family issues without judgment, never pushing me to reconcile when I wasn't ready. When I told her about the science fair incident, she got this look of pure rage on her face that made me fall in love with her a little more. We married after graduation, moved to Seattle for our residencies, built a life far from my family and the pain of my past. Donna understood why I needed distance, never made me feel guilty for protecting myself. She'd grown up with loving, supportive parents who couldn't understand how mine had acted. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with this heartbroken expression when I'd mentioned something from my childhood that she found horrifying. 2 years ago, we welcomed Lily. Becoming a father changed everything. Holding this tiny person who depended on me completely, I promised myself she'd always feel loved and supported, no matter what path she chose. If she wanted to be a doctor, great. If she wanted to fix cars, great. If she wanted to be a professional finger painter, I'd buy her the best paints money could buy. Flash forward to now. I'm a successful pediatrician, Donna's making waves at a prominent law firm, and Lily's a precocious 2-year-old who keeps us laughing. Life is good, but I still carry that hurt, like a scar that aches when it rains. Then came that phone call. Mom, crying, explaining that Bobby's business had failed spectacularly. Not just bankruptcy, gambling debts, shady characters. Apparently, Bobby had gotten involved with some loan sharks who weren't exactly patient about repayment schedules. My parents had to remortgage their house, sell their vacation home to bail him out. The same vacation home they'd refused to let me use for a week with friends in high school, claiming they needed it for family time. Bobby and his buddies had stayed there for a month that same summer, leaving beer cans and cigarette burns everywhere. The business failure wasn't even Bobby's first. Turned out there had been 2 other ventures my parents had quietly funded over the years. A landscaping company that lasted 6 months. Some kind of online merchandise thing that never made a single sale. Each time, Bobby had promised this was it. This was his big break. Each time, my parents had opened their wallets. Suddenly, they want to reconnect. They've been calling, texting, asking to visit and meet their granddaughter. Dad even sent an email about how proud he is of my success and how he wants to make amends. The email was 3 paragraphs about my accomplishments and one sentence asking about Lily. It felt calculated, like he'd Googled how to reconnect with estranged son and was following a template. Part of me wants that chance. They're my parents. I miss having family. I miss the idea of family, anyway. I think about Lily and wonder if I'm depriving her of grandparents. But another part burns with anger. It feels like they only want me now because Bobby disappointed them and they need someone to be proud of. I'm the backup plan, the consolation prize. Donna thinks I should hear them out, but was protective, offering to be there as support. You don't owe them anything, she kept saying. But if you want to try, I'll be right there with you. That woman has a way of making everything seem possible, even forgiveness. After much consideration and several sleepless nights, I decided to meet them. My terms: neutral location. Just us. If this was going to blow up, I didn't want Donna and Lily caught in the crossfire. The days leading up to the meeting were rough. I found myself snapping at Donna over little things, having trouble sleeping. The night before, I sat in Lily's room long after she'd fallen asleep, watching her peaceful face and wondering if I was making the right decision. She looked so innocent, so trusting. I wanted to protect that innocence, but I also wanted her to have grandparents who loved her. The morning of the meeting, I arrived early at this quiet cafe near my workplace. Chose a corner table for privacy, somewhere we could fall apart without an audience. As I waited, memories flooded back. All those times I'd sat waiting for them at my events, debate competitions, science fairs, graduation ceremonies. They were always late, usually because of something Bobby-related. Bobby's game ran long. Bobby needed a ride. Bobby had forgotten something important. But this time, they were early. I saw them through the window, walking toward the cafe. They looked older, more worn down. Mom's hair fully gray now, lines around her eyes I didn't remember. Dad's shoulders hunched where they used to be broad and confident. They moved carefully, like people who'd been carrying heavy burdens for too long. They entered, and we stared at each other for a moment. 8 years of silence hanging in the air between us. Then Mom rushed forward, hugged me tightly. I stiffened, not used to such displays from her, but eventually hugged her back. She felt smaller than I remembered, fragile. We sat down, and I let them speak first. Mom did most of the talking, Dad sitting there looking uncomfortable and occasionally nodding. She apologized for the past, saying they realized how unfair they'd been. She talked about being proud of my accomplishments, regretting not supporting me more. The words sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the mirror. Then came the real reason they wanted to reconnect. Bobby's situation wasn't just simple bankruptcy. He'd gotten involved with gambling, started small but escalated quickly. Poker games, sports betting, eventually owing money to people who didn't accept IOUs. The business was just a front toward the end, a way to launder money he was borrowing from increasingly dangerous sources. My parents had received threatening phone calls. Men showing up at their house asking about Bobby's whereabouts. They'd been terrified, sold everything they could to pay off his debts and get him into rehab. The golden child had nearly gotten them killed. I listened silently, letting them talk. Part of me felt vindicated. All those years of Bobby being the favorite, and this was where it led. But another part felt sad for my parents, who looked broken and ashamed. When they finished, I took a deep breath and told them exactly how I felt. Every instance of favoritism, every dismissed achievement, every time they'd chosen Bobby over me. The nights I cried myself to sleep in college, wondering why I wasn't good enough for their support. Selling my laptop, a graduation gift from my grandmother, to pay for textbooks. Working night shifts, coming home smelling of grease and exhaustion while they funded Bobby's partying. I told them about the time I'd called home during finals week, having a panic attack about organic chemistry, and Mom had cut me off because Bobby was having girlfriend problems. About how I'd invited them to my medical school graduation, and they'd said they couldn't afford the trip, then posted pictures on Facebook from Bobby's vacation to Florida the same weekend. Dad tried to interrupt, defend their actions. I shut him down. Reminded him of all Bobby's football games he attended, while missing my debate team winning state championship. The academic awards ceremonies he'd skipped because they conflicted with Bobby's practices. The way he'd light up talking about Bobby's touchdowns, but glaze over when I mentioned my grades. I told them that while I appreciated their apology, it didn't erase years of hurt and neglect. The damage was done. I'd learned not to need them, and that was both liberating and heartbreaking. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would be on my terms. Time and effort on their part. No more Bobby drama. No more treating me like the responsible one who didn't need attention or support. I also addressed Bobby directly. While I sympathized with his situation, I wasn't interested in being his safety net or competing for their attention again. My life, my wife, my daughter were my priorities now. I'd built something beautiful without them, and I wasn't going to let their chaos destroy it. As I spoke, I could see pain and regret on their faces. Mom cried silently, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of our conversation. Part of me felt guilty for causing them pain, but another part felt relieved to finally say these things out loud. The conversation ended with mixed emotions. We agreed on taking things slow. Occasional phone calls, no promises about visits or introducing them to Lily. I needed time to process, and they needed to respect my boundaries. No surprise visits, no guilt trips, no attempts to manipulate me through Lily. Walking to my car afterward, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. Not the heartwarming reconciliation some might hope for, but honest and necessary. I sat there for 20 minutes, replaying everything, then went home to Donna waiting with open arms and Chinese takeout. That night, lying in bed, Donna asked how I felt. I wasn't sure. Part of me felt lighter, like I'd released a burden I'd carried for years. But another part felt raw, like an old wound reopened. For the first time in years, there seemed like a possibility of having some kind of relationship with my parents again. Not easy, lots to work through, but possible. A month later, things got complicated again. We'd been having limited contact, a few awkward phone calls. Mom trying too hard, calling more than I was comfortable with, always asking about Lily. She'd ramble about toys she'd seen that reminded her of her granddaughter, places she wanted to take her, things she wanted to teach her. I had to set boundaries, reminding her she needed to earn the right to be a grandmother. Dad remained distant, struggling with his pride. Our one conversation lasted 15 minutes and consisted mostly of him asking about my work like he was interviewing me for a job. I could tell he was trying, but it felt forced, unnatural. Then Bobby sent me a rambling email. 3 pages long, single-spaced, clearly written at 2 a.m. by someone with too much time and too many regrets. Part apology, part plea for help. He wrote about messing up his life, taking advantage of our parents, wishing he'd been a better brother. He mentioned specific incidents I'd forgotten, like the time he'd borrowed my car without asking and gotten into an accident. Our parents had paid for repairs without making him face consequences, while I'd had to take the bus for a month. At first, I was touched. It seemed genuine, like he'd actually done some soul-searching. He acknowledged the favoritism, admitted he'd been spoiled, said he understood why I'd distanced myself from the family. But as I kept reading, the true purpose became clear. Bobby wanted money, had a business idea, sure it would solve his problems, wanted me to invest. A food truck selling gourmet hot dogs. He'd done extensive research and was confident about the profit margins. The whole thing was vague and poorly thought out. Clearly he'd learned nothing from his previous failures. The audacity was breathtaking. After nearly getting our parents killed with his gambling debts, after bleeding them dry for years, he was coming to me with his hand out. The same guy who'd mocked my career choices in high school was now asking Dr. Johnny for a loan. I was furious. After everything, after all the pain and reconciliation attempts, he still saw me as nothing more than a potential cash source. The emotional manipulation was textbook. Start with genuine-sounding apology, acknowledge wrongdoing, then slide in the real request. It was like a master class in how to be a terrible human being. I didn't respond to Bobby. Instead, I called my parents. The conversation was tense from the start. I asked them if they knew about the email, and they admitted they did. In fact, they'd encouraged Bobby to reach out. They thought if Bobby and I reconciled, it would help bring the family together. Like we were puzzle pieces that just needed to be arranged correctly. I lost it. Their manipulation was exactly why I distanced myself originally. I reminded them of all the times they'd enabled Bobby's behavior. Covering for him when he cheated on tests in high school. Paying his rent when he'd spent his paycheck on beer. Bailing him out of jail after that DUI in his 20s. Always Bobby's guardian angels, never letting him face consequences. I told them I wasn't funding another Bobby scheme, and I was hurt they'd even consider asking after everything we'd discussed. Did our conversation mean nothing? Was this their idea of respecting boundaries? The call ended badly. Mom crying again, Dad defensive, me shaking with anger. All our tentative progress undone in an instant. I felt like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football, and they'd pulled it away again. After calming down and talking with Donna, we decided to step back again. The trust so tentatively rebuilt had shattered like glass hitting concrete. I was discouraged but strangely relieved. This confirmed my instincts were right. My family still didn't understand the pain they'd caused or respect my boundaries. I sent a brief email to my parents the next morning. Professional, clinical. I needed space, would contact them when ready. Any future relationship depended on their ability to respect boundaries and treat me as an equal, not just a solution to their Bobby problem. I wasn't their backup plan or their retirement fund. 6 months passed. 6 months of focusing on my real family, the one I'd chosen and built. Work was busy, Lily was growing like a weed, and Donna was up for partner at her firm. Life moved forward without the drama. Then something unexpected happened. I received a letter from Dad. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. The envelope had my name written in his familiar script, the same handwriting from birthday cards when I was little, before everything got complicated. Inside, he did something I never thought I'd see. Offered a genuine, heartfelt apology without asking for anything in return. No agenda, no manipulation, just honest regret. He acknowledged their favoritism toward Bobby, the hurt they'd caused me, the mistakes they'd made trying to reconcile. He didn't make excuses or blame circumstances, just took responsibility. He wrote about doing lots of thinking over the past months, how he'd realized his own insecurities had influenced his behavior. He admitted to living vicariously through Bobby's athletic achievements because he felt like a failure in his own career. Always proud of my academic success, but hadn't known how to show it, hadn't understood that different kids needed different kinds of support. The letter was raw, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen from him. He talked about his own father, who'd been distant and critical, how he'd sworn to do better but ended up repeating the same patterns. He was in therapy now, working through his issues, trying to understand how he'd damaged his relationship with his son. I was skeptical at first. Words are easy, change is hard. But something about the letter felt different. Maybe the effort of writing by hand, the time it must have taken to craft each sentence. Maybe enough time had passed for real reflection. Either way, it opened the door to cautious communication. We started talking more regularly. Usually just Dad and me, Mom giving us space to work things out. The conversations were still sometimes awkward, but they felt more honest. He asked about my work and really listened when I answered. Asked about Lily with genuine interest, not just grandparent hunger. He shared more about his own struggles, his difficulty admitting mistakes, his fear of losing his children permanently. The breakthrough came when he asked if he could send Lily a birthday gift. Instead of just saying yes, I suggested we video call so he could watch her open it. The joy on his face when Lily excitedly unwrapped the toy doctor kit was something I hadn't seen in years. Pure, uncomplicated happiness. For a moment, he looked like the dad I remembered from before Bobby's sports became the center of our universe. Mom and Bobby remained complicated. Mom had backed off, respecting my boundaries more. She sent occasional emails with family recipes and old photos, small gestures that felt like attempts to connect without overwhelming me. The recipes were actually helpful. Donna and I had been trying to cook more, and Mom's pot roast recipe was legitimately good. I learned through Dad that Bobby had finally sought help for his gambling addiction. He was working a steady job for the first time in years, living in a halfway house, attending meetings. He hadn't reached out to me directly, which was probably for the best. Dad mentioned that Bobby was slowly paying back money he owed our parents, $20 here, $50 there. It would take years, but it was progress. The biggest change, though, had been in my own perspective. Through all this chaos and attempted reconciliation, I'd realized something important. While I couldn't change the past or control my family's actions, I could control how I responded to them. I'd been carrying anger and resentment like rocks in my backpack, and it was exhausting. I started working on letting go. Not forgetting, not excusing, but releasing the grip those old hurts had on me. Some days were better than others. I'd still get angry thinking about missed opportunities or unfair treatment. But I was trying, and that was something. I'd also gained new appreciation for my own family. Donna had been incredibly supportive through all this mess, offering advice when I needed it, just listening when I needed to vent. Watching Lily grow, helping shape her understanding of family and fairness, had made me reflect on what I wanted those concepts to mean for her. Last weekend, we took Lily to the park. As I pushed her on the swing, she laughed with pure joy, completely in the moment. Donna sat on a nearby bench, smiling at both of us, and I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. Regardless of what happened with my parents and Bobby, I had built something beautiful. A family based on love, trust, and mutual respect. We're taking things day by day now. Not rushing into anything, but not slamming doors either. My priority remains my wife and daughter, but I'm cautiously optimistic about healing some wounds with my parents. Not returning to what we were, because that was broken, but maybe building something new, something healthier. This journey has been difficult but enlightening. I've learned about forgiveness, about boundaries, about the difference between family by blood and family by choice. I've learned that healing isn't linear, that setbacks don't negate progress, that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who taught us what we didn't want to become. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for the strength it gave me. Grateful for the clarity it provided about what matters. Grateful for the family I chose and built with my own hands. The story's still being written, and honestly, I'm okay with not knowing how it ends. For the first time in years, I'm at peace with uncertainty. Whatever happens next, I know I can handle it. And that knowledge, that quiet confidence, might be the best gift my dysfunctional family ever gave me.